Welcome back to another Pythonnet tutorial. So we are picking up a series that I started a while back, and then of course I forgot to continue it. Well, I didn't forget to continue it. I had other stuff come up, and then of course it got kind of put to the wayside. So this series is related to Windows Forms. And so basically the idea behind Windows Forms is that we can create desktop applications that we can then control and build them from Pythonnet, right? So with the Windows Form, you can build a desktop application that is basically a graphical user interface where you combine certain functionality that you've coded to that application. So it's really great where you've created some awesome code. You want to make it where other people can use it, but you want to give them a nice user interface so that way they don't have to necessarily do all the fancy coding in order to use it. So this is an awesome way to take your code and make it more available. Now, what we've done so far is basically build a shell of kind of an application aspect, right? And so if we forgot, we'll just bring it up right now. So we can see right now that we have a very simple application. It's really not doing anything fancy. It's just a button that we have attached to it. And the idea behind this particular application is we're going to parse interop libraries. Now, I'm not going to make it super fancy, but fancy enough to where we can do some basic operations like grab a specific type from that interop library. Additionally, being able to load all the existing interop libraries into the application, and so on and so on. So right now, we don't really have much of the functionality. We've kind of just got a shell of an application. Now, this particular series is also going to be kind of in tandem with another series that I'm going to kick off relatively soon because I think it's finally in a relatively good spot that I'm happy with, which is we're going to basically mimic what we did with the Win32com library, but we're going to build our own library, right? So we're going to build our own version of Win32com where we're going to be able to ingest an assembly or an interop library, and we're going to be able to auto-generate all the Python code that is necessary. So I've pretty much figured it out, and at this point I would say relatively just kind of testing things and seeing how it is. But right now I can auto-generate all the code from an interop assembly for the most part. There's a couple of different things I have to kind of work on, but for most of the methods and properties, they work. And then ideally what it would look like is you could then run this particular library in a very similar fashion that we've done before, which is, where is it? I can never remember where I put it. Maybe it was here. But just importing it in a very hierarchical, I don't even know, in a very hierarchy-based fashion, I guess if that's the way you want to think about it. And then from here, we can also extend the functionality. So we're going to be leveraging some code that I built in that particular library inside our GUI application. So if I don't spend a lot of time explaining necessarily how that code works or how it's built, don't worry, it will be coming, and I will be sharing how I kind of built this whole library in order to basically parse these interop libraries. But I've done enough talking, so let's pick up where we left off. Last thing we did is we created a load file button. So that's that nice little blue button that we saw inside of our wonderful GUI application. And so from here, we're going to start adding a couple other components. I am going to create a close button, but right now I'm not going to have it do anything crazy yet. It's just basically going to be a placeholder. The functionality is not going to be built in there just yet. And then on top of that, we're going to see if we can get started with the combo box. And so that's the idea with the combo box is we're going to show you how to at least put something in there. All right, so here's the thing when it comes to building this stuff. Try to reuse code as much as possible. After doing this for a while, I've kind of noticed that there's definitely a better approach than probably the way I'm doing it. But right now, I'm more focused on just showing you a bunch of examples on how to do something because there's just no documentation out there. So ideally, there might be more efficient ways to do this, but right now I want to focus on just showing you as many examples as possible, and then possibly expanding on this later and saying, hey, how can we simplify this? How can we make this a little bit more manageable and condensed? So what I'm going to do is really, I'm just going to kind of copy this little section that represents my close button, or sorry, my load button, and I'm going to make it my close button, right? And so, because really at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's just, we're going to have different text and so on and so on. So a nice little trick here that I like to do is if I do Control H, well, actually let me do it like this, Control H, and then I specify my selection. What I can do is I can just say, okay, well, take my load file button and change it to my close file. And so this will replace all the code in this little section. So this is a nice way where I can maintain some type of ease of use. And then from here, we're just gonna have to change the components that we need to. Now, on top of this, we do have to change some sizing and stuff like that. So right now, what I'm gonna be doing is really just changing this one right here. So I'm gonna do 316. You might be guessing, well, how did you know that, Alex? How did you know it was gonna be 316? Well, I cheated a little bit and I built this beforehand, so I know the little secrets. All right, so now if we run it, let's see what we get. Nothing, right? Well, reason why is we never added the control to the actual form itself. So what we're gonna do is we're basically now gonna just copy this little section down here. So we're gonna add that next control, and we'll just say, you know, close file button. And then we also do want some events that are associated with our close file button. So we'll just say close file, and then we'll say close file. And then we will have a close file button, mouse enter, and then close file, mouse leave. So for the most part, very, very, very simple. We're just gonna put this down here. And then again, just to make our lives easier, we'll just do a Control H. We'll make sure we're specifying that selection. And then I just want to change everything that says load file and make it close file. Perfect. It's very handy when you're having to write a lot of different stuff. So now we have our load assembly, and then our close assembly. So very basic stuff. We just have two buttons on our application. Let's see if we can keep going with this. All right, so now the next component is we have our buttons. One will load the assembly, and then ideally one will close the assembly once we add that functionality. Now, what happens when we load the assembly? Well, let me just bring it up again, and I'll kind of walk through what I'm thinking. So when I click this load assembly button, I want to have a combo box up here that's populated with all the assemblies in a particular directory that I specify. Now, for right now, I am going to make it hard-coded, but eventually down the road, I will show you kind of how you make it a little bit more dynamic. Maybe have something like a load file dialog or something like that. Something to make it a little bit more intuitive for the user to kind of, you know, go and grab where they want to grab from. So that's at least the initial idea. Is for right now, we're going to make it static, but it will load that static folder and it will look for a certain type of file, and then it will load those files inside this particular combo box. So right now, I think it probably makes sense to have our combo box added to our particular, our form. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy this, just put this right here, and we'll call this, define the combo box. Define the combo box. All right. Okay, so how do we create a combo box? So create a new combo box in the form. Okay, so we're gonna call this one self dot, we'll do it types combo box because it's gonna load all of our types ideally. Or I mean, you can technically call it interop, but we'll keep it that. And so it's gonna be a system.windows.forms, and then it's gonna be a combo box object. So I'm just gonna put a C in there, and then also it is a capital B. Okay, so let me go here. So again, I want to make sure that I kind of walk through documentation in case, you know, you're new to this. I'm assuming most of you are probably coming from a Python background. So combo boxes are basically like a drop-down box that kind of has a little bit more functionality. There's a little bit more when you can do selection and stuff like that. So when you're thinking about a combo box can basically have a bunch of different items inside of it. And the collection of those items is considered an object collection. So that basically represents all the items in that particular combo box. It will make a little bit more sense once you see it in action, but ideally, you want to think of a combo box as kind of like a drop down where you can select some items and then you can change the behavior of interacting with that combo box. So you can do things like enable multi-select. You can change the fonts. You can change everything that appears in that combo box. And so from here, what you can do is you can see there's a lot of different properties we can set on it. Things related to the drop down height, the style, the width, dropped down, flat style, focus, for color, a lot of different stuff. And then there's other things that we can do too, like adding items, adding events. We can do selects, we can do toStrings, we can do a lot of different things inside of it. So that way we can make it more interactive for that user. So what we're gonna first do is we've created our combo box. What do we need to do from here? Well, the first thing that we should do is we should define the size and the location. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say define the size and location of my combo box. Because just because you have a combo box doesn't mean it's gonna be a certain size, and it doesn't mean it's gonna be where you want it to be. So we're gonna take our combo box, so we're gonna take types combo box, and then this has a property called location. Now with location, it's how far in points from the left do you want to be, and how far down from the top in points do you want to be down. So in this case, if you don't remember, we can use the system.drawing.point object, and we can specify a point. That point is made up of basically a location on a plane. So we're going to say 30 and 100. So this means 30 points in from the left and then 100 points down from the top. So that's going to specify the location. So we have a location now, but now we want to define its size. So this is going to say, hey, how big is this particular object, right? And the idea here is now we're going to change this from a point object to a size object, because this represents a height and a width. This is kind of like an X and a Y. This is a height and a width. So here I want my width to be 540 and I want my height to be 100. So this is define my height and my width of my combo box. So I have enough now to add it to my form. It's not going to look very pretty, but at least we'll have it. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to add my combo box to my controls collection. So I'm going to say delete that and I'm going to do types combo box. After that, I'm going to right click. Let's run that Python file. And now we can see there is a combo box, albeit small, but a combo box nonetheless. So from here, let's start thinking about how we can format this combo box to make it just a little bit, cleaner, maybe a little bit more consistent with what we're doing in our actual user interface. So a couple of things I might want to do is I might want to change the drop-down height. So what I'll say here is we'll change the drop-down height, and then we'll see what that has on the actual combo box itself. So we'll take our combo box, and there is a drop-down height property, and then we'll specify 100. Again, you might be going, Alex, how are you knowing there is that property? Well, we don't get IntelliSense, but we do have the documentation. And remember, our documentation is usually pretty thorough when it comes to Microsoft products. And so if you notice here, I just explore a little bit. I'm looking at it, I'm going like, okay, drop-down height, what does that do? Gets or sets the height in pixels of the drop-down portion of the combo box. I said, okay, that's simple enough. So play around with it, put it in, see what you get. So let's right click and see what this does. So it definitely makes it, and this is kind of an interesting thing too. You would think like, oh, it's going to change the actual height. No, it's the actual drop down itself. So when you click it and that drop-down appears, it's going to change it. So naturally, if I make this smaller, I should see a smaller drop-down. A little bit better, right? So definitely, ooh, jeez. My chair kind of slipped out on me. So naturally, if you make it smaller, it's gonna be, a smaller drop down, the number at least. So that does the drop down height. What else can we do with it? Well, we can also specify the item height. So we can say the types combo box, and then the item height is equal to 30. And again, here, if we're any point confused, we can look it up and say, okay, well, what is an item height? Gets or sets the height of an item in the combo box. The height in pixels, and it's okay. So the other thing to kind of keep in mind with this one is certain times if you have certain draw modes on, it will kind of overwrite certain things. And so sometimes you'll turn this on, nothing will happen. Sometimes you just need to check and see if you have a draw mode on. Otherwise, it could be a lot of different things necessary what's happening, especially if you're setting a lot of different properties. So right now we don't have any items in it, so it's not really doing anything. Okay, so what are some other things that we can do? Well, we can set the for color. And here we'll do for color equals, I'll use my system.drawing.color, and then we'll do from name. So my color object, and I'll call that from name method. And here I'm gonna use the name gray. Now, I did use it for from name up above. So let's see what we get with this. Again, we don't have anything, so there's not gonna be any changes. At least apparently right now, we're not seeing anything. And then we can also change the actual style of our button. Of our dropdown. So change the flat style of our dropdown, of our combo box. I keep saying, I keep realizing I keep saying dropdown. I'm like, it's not dropdown, it's combo box. So here, we're gonna say, okay, self.types combo box, and there's a flat style property. And then we can set that equal to a system.windows.forms.flat style, and then we'll do the flat enumeration. So now it kind of becomes a little bit harder to see, but you can see it's now a flat style. So we don't have that kind of like 3D effect. And then I'm gonna move some notes really quickly. And then from here, you can also change your drop-down style. So we can say self.types combo box, and then we can do drop-down style equals system.forms combo box style, and then we'll do drop-down list. And I'll show you what this one is. Gets or sets the value. So here, so if you're ever kind of curious, like, okay, it's a property value, and then we'll have combo box style values. So it specifies that the list is displayed by clicking the down arrow and that the portion is not editable. This means that the user cannot enter a new value. Only values in the list can be selected. And then there's drop down. So here, and it's editable, and then simple is always visible, and the portion is editable. So in this case, we don't want it editable, so we just want them to select. Windows.forms.combo. Okay, so nothing too crazy right now. And then from here, we are going to change the font. So change the font. And so we're going to say types. We're going to say self dot types combo box and then font. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different here because we have actually defined a font up above, but I want to show you just a different way of doing something where if you don't want to necessarily specify the font over and over again, we can kind of define our system font, right? So we'll just call this our self dot, I don't know, button font, something like that, right? And we'll say it's a system.drawing.font object where we're going to specify Roboto, and then we're going to specify that height of 12. So now what I can do is, because this represents a font object, I can just copy that property and then assign it to my particular combo box. And so in this case, it should mimic the one that we want. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to insert an item, so that way we can see an item inside of our combo box. But it's really just kind of a placeholder at this point. So I'm going to say add a placeholder in the combo box. And so we'll say, okay, so we'll take our self.types combo box. We know there's an items collection which represents all the items in my combo box. So basically like all the text and individual items in that dropdown. And well, right now there's not any, but I know there's an insert method, and the insert method just specifies, well, what is the index or basically position you want to insert in that combo box? Well, I don't have any right now, so it's going to be 0. And then I need to specify, well, what do I want to insert? Well, I just want it to really just be a kind of like a placeholder. So I'll just say, please select a library, and then 3 little dots. So let's see what this does for us. Well, kind of. Well, it's there, but you know, I really would like it if it's, you know, right there, and you know, you kind of see it right when you go in, and you know, it's kind of a little bit big of a font. So maybe I'll do like 10.5, maybe. Just see what happens. See if it looks any better. Okay, so we want it to be the one that's currently selected. So we'll do types.combobox, and then we'll do the selected index, because the selected index represents the one that you want currently selected. So if you had like 5, for example, you could say, well, I want the one that's currently selected is, you know, number 4, right? But remember, it's 0 based, so we have to start 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this case, I want my 0 item to be selected. So basically, I kind of pre-selected. And then from here, let's see what we get. Okay, that looks better. So now it's pre-selected for me. Not too bad. I'm happy with that. And then there's also some other stuff too that we can define about our combo box. So one is called draw mode. And then so from here, this is saying system.windows.forms.draw mode, and then normal. And I'll explain kind of what this is in a second. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's doing anything, but we'll see in a second. So right now, I'm actually going to comment this out, and then we'll come back to it. So I look at this and I'm going, it's nice, but I would really like a border around it. But I don't want that 3D border because it's ugly. So what we probably could do is we could maybe let's do a border around it. So I have notes. So I'm going to use some notes. If I can find my notes. Ah, there it is. Yes. Ooh, this is the fun one too. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. So we are going to change the border of that combo box, right? So I want to change the border, and I want to have control over what color it looks like. Because right now I want it to be light gray. And unfortunately, there's not really an easy way of doing that with a combo box. And so we can do it, but we're basically going to have to draw a shape around it that's the exact same dimensions as the combo box. Now, initially, when you're looking at it, you're like, God, this seems like it's a lot. It's really not that bad, but it does take a little bit of thinking through and going like, okay, what am I doing here that might be important? So it is considered an event, but I consider it a different type of event. So these are more like interaction events. This one I would consider a drawing event. Again, it might not be the formal way of defining it, but I personally look at it like that because I like to kind of keep these events categorized in my own little head. Like I say, this is interaction. This is more drawing component events. So we're going to have an event that's going to draw something. Okay, so we know that. Let's define what that event looks like. So here, define a new event, and we're going to call this one draw combo box border, and it will take self, the sender, so the person who's sending that event, and then any arguments that they're sending along the way. And then here, define the event to draw the border around the combo box. Perfect. Okay, so what is this going to look? The first thing we need to do is we need to get the dimensions of my combo box. That's actually not too hard, but what we're going to do is we're going to just modify it. So we're going to say define the dimensions of my combo box. And so here I'm going to say my x equals self.types combo box. It's the location property, and it's the x of my location. And I do need to subtract 1 from it. And then y is going to be my self.types combo box, and then my location, and then it's y minus 1. And then we're going to have a w, which is my self.types combo box. And then this one is actually a width property. So this defines the width. This one's going to have a +1. And then h is going to be self.types combo box. And then this will be the height of my combo box. All right. Making progress. We like it. Okay. So we have dimensions, or basically 4 different numbers. We're now going to create a new shape. So we're going to create a new rectangle. So create a new rectangle. And so we're going to say combo rectangle is going to equal system.drawing and then rectangle. And then it's going to be the x, the y, the w, and the h. Because that's, you need 4 points to define a rectangle. And then from here, we're going to define a pen object. This pen object basically is kind of like a mechanism to draw it. So define a new pen object. So we'll call this combo pen. This will equal system dot drawing. And then this one will be a pen object. And then that pen object can take an argument called drawing, a system.drawing.color. So it can take a color object, and then it's going to be dark gray. Now, if you were like me, that kind of confused me at first. I'm like, wait a minute. There's these, these pen objects. Like, how does this all work, right? Or there's, these color objects. Like, how does this all work? And then from here, I have to find it first. If it's even in here. Drawing. There's so many objects. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it's definitely what I would consider overwhelming sometimes, because, if you don't know what you're looking at, I mean, you can get lost easily in this stuff. Luckily, I've gone through the headache of doing that a couple times. So I'm a little bit used to it, but it still gets frustrating at times. System.windows to controls, forms, design. I think it's this one. And then there's a pen object. No. Where did I pull it from? System.drawing. Oh, maybe it's up here at the top. Oh, here we go. System.drawing. There it is. Okay. So we have a color object. In this case, we're working with a pen object. defines an object used to draw lines and curves. This class cannot be inherited. So basically, we're creating an object that is used to draw that rectangle, and it can be constructed by basically passing through a color. But you could also, if you wanted to, pass through a brush, or a brush in a single, or a color in a single. So there's different ways to construct this object, but I'm choosing to construct this object using a color object. All right, so we've defined a pen. Grab the graphics object. So grab the graphics object. And so we're going to say combo graphic equals, and this is something that was actually passed through. So my combo box has a basically like a graphics component that we can play with a little bit. And so here we're going to do a draw rectangle. And then this is going to be the combo pen. So we're going to pass through the pen. So this is the mechanism to draw it. And then we need to tell it, well, what do you want to draw? Well, we want to draw the combo rectangle. So we want to draw that particular rectangle. So we're here, draw the rectangle, but really it's just the border, which is really the border. Okay. Now, just because you drew it doesn't mean it's actually going to show, especially after it's loaded. So we need to do self.combo or types, or is it types combo box dot refresh. So we need to call the refresh method to load it. Make sure to load the changes. Okay, so now we need to define our event. Our event is going to be a, where is it? A self.paint object, and it's going to equal a system.windows.forms.paint event handler. And then we're going to say, well, what do you want to pass through? Well, we want to pass through that draw combo box borders event. And that's really it. That's for the most part, I think, all we really need from that. What is that my... Oh, well, maybe I didn't. I don't know. I thought I misplaced something. So let's see what this looks like. Where is it? Ooh. Well, that's not good, right? What did I do wrong? Graphics from ComboBox Basics, ComboBox. Oh, I know. I think I know what it is. 1 second. Where did I put it? Natural draw rectangle. Oh. Did I misspell something? I might have misspelled something. That's probably why. Where did I put it? Oh, I see what I did. It's supposed to be combo graphic draw rectangle. Okay, that looks better. So now we have a border around it that is the gray that I wanted it to be. So you kind of look at yourself and you kind of say, man, just to do a border requires that much work. Sadly, it does at this point. I'm sure there will be people out there who will find a much easier way to do it than I just did it. And by all means, if you find that way, I'd be more than happy to hear about it. But yeah, but it does show at least you do have the capability if you need it. And I think honestly, understanding how to do this graphics component where you're drawing something is very useful, because that will come in handy if you really want to start getting into some of the user interface components. I think at this point, my video has gone way too long. So at this point, let's cut it off. If you have any questions, by all means, put them down in the comments below. In our next video, what we're going to do is we are going to bind some functionality to this combo box, where when we click a button, it will be populated with the items that we are concerned about. So at this point, any questions, again, put them down in the comments below. Otherwise, we will see you in the next video.